Jirikova with us from the European Commission, because she will look into our work from the policy and EU level. Yeah, so I think, and actually, before I forget, I'm having Lucy Middlemiss from the University of Leeds with me, who will co-moderate with me. So she will do the second part of this event. So without further ado, I will pass the floor on to João Pedro Gouveia, who's from the University of Lisbon and also part of the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. He knows a great lot on energy poverty, both in Europe and with a specific focus also on Portugal. So João, I would suggest I stop sharing my screen and I give the floor to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'll start putting in my presentation. First, you see the polar bear. No, yes, the presentation. So, good morning. Thank you for the invitation again from the WELLBASED Consortium. I'll go very briefly through a couple of ideas to kickstart this session today, and I'll focus on the existing well-known triangle of energy poverty drivers. So, looking to the past winter and see what has happened to income, to energy prices, and see if we have done something good on energy efficiency of homes. Because what do we know? This is not a surprise. Well over 30 million Europeans, probably up to 100 million Europeans, are currently experiencing one or more of the dimensions of energy poverty. So they might not be able to heat their homes or cool their homes. Recent weeks in Portugal and Spain, we have seen extreme weather events, severe heat waves in the middle of April, for example. So this is a problem. We have a lot of people with arrears on energy bills. We have, of course, we know well, very high energy costs, especially this winter compared to their income, and a structural problem linked to the homes living in rooms with problems of humidity and mold. This was already a severe problem across the different European member states, but clearly in the last 2 to 3 years, a couple of events have magnified this problem. So we have the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the war in Ukraine, the consequence on energy crisis, more recently inflation. So all of this has created really a master chaos, as the title of my presentation. But this is not seen yet on the standard energy poverty indicators, because there is a delay. So the usual and most commonly used energy poverty indicators, mainly updated on an annual basis, some even less, have this delay. So what do we know from the standard indicators? We know information from still 2021 or others 2020. So we still cannot reflect the impact of the energy prices and inflation on our most recent data on indicators. So if we know the situation was bad before, we know we cannot really track in a up-to-date manner the impacts of this on energy poverty. What do we have? That's what I want to unfold here today. So we know, looking to one of the parts of the standard triangle, energy efficiency in buildings. So we know this is mentioned on the renovation wave. This is mentioned on any European policy around this area, that the share of annual building stock major renovations, so deep energy renovations, is very low. A couple of examples here, and we know from BPEI that almost 97% of the building stock of the European Union must be upgraded to achieve this 2050 vision of carbon neutrality and full decarbonization of buildings. So this is a major challenge. And what we have seen, some money coming from the Recovery and Resilience Plan, but not pushing forward deep energy renovations. I can give you the example of Portugal. Of course, there was investment, important investment, but not a lot on this idea of deep energy renovation, and especially with a low focus on insulation, which should be our priority. It was solar PV, it is windows, it is heat pumps, but not exactly going to the core of the problem, to passive measures of building. So if we didn't improve a lot this winter on this, let's go to another one. Energy prices. So household electricity prices, for example. So only in 2 member states, the electricity price didn't increase for different reasons, support of the state or other things. But we see that countries like Romania, the increase was 112% compared to the last semester, of the second half of 2021. And we see that a huge increase also in Belgium, in Italy, in Lithuania, Denmark. So most of the countries had a significant increase of electricity prices, and a lot of them use electricity for, of course, different end uses in our homes. Another example, which is even more critical in some European countries for heating their homes, household gas prices. So household gas prices increased in the second half of 2022 on all 24 EU member states that reported data. 3 of them didn't send data yet, but this is also a critical impact. So the households gas prices was higher in Sweden, lowest in Hungary, but the point here is more on the increase. That's why I chose this graph. You can see a significant increase in Czechia, in Romania, in Latvia. We are talking about 230% increase in Czechia, 165 in Romania. And this is important to know. The cost of energy was the main driver of this increase, because we know that the second semester of a year on energy prices, of course, the energy costs are higher because of the climate and demand and supply. But here clearly was the cost of energy that drove this. So energy efficiency, some improvements, not a lot. Energy prices, we are severely worse. And then we look to the income. We had inflation. We know that a significant amount of countries have a lot of people on risk of poverty. So we still have a structural issue. The winter, clearly, it's not unfolded in the main indicators, but clearly the winter will add a lot of impact on families. So what 2 last slides just to convey the message. One is for you to look into our EPA indicators dashboard, so the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub updated dashboard, where you can know more about each indicator, get the most updated data, and we'll be in the next couple of months adding other indicators around climate, around transportation, around health also. So to be more comprehensive on energy poverty understanding. A final slide is just to show you a couple of examples of the winter in Portugal. So we got a report from a health institute that says that we had 4 periods of excess mortality last year, and 4 of them, on the 4, there was a relationship with either only one around COVID and flus, but the other 2 was around extreme cold and extreme heat. So this is already more info on this. What we also knew from the winter was the increased demand for firewood. We had a couple of news in Portugal, but this happened in a lot of countries that still use fireplaces a lot. So demand for firewood has risen when we've seen the gas and electricity prices. And it's in Portuguese because I copied the news from the newspapers, but just to show you, this increase in firewood has a severe consequence on health, not only in respiratory problems, but people dying in the fireplaces because they fall, because of different conditions. So there are 3 news from this winter, and I do this for my classes regularly. So unfortunately, in the last 6 years, I've collected more than probably 50 news around this issue of fireplaces. So the last point is for you, that's why we are here. So multiple stakeholders need to be engaged, and this session is an example to promote on-the-ground action. It's like chess. We need to see the whole board, all players come together to support energy poverty mitigation at the European level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, João, for walking us through the most recent developments and showing quite horrifying figures, actually. Let's try to get more positive now, even though I think it's good to know what is happening. And let's move on to Elena. And actually, before I forget, please don't forget, if you have any questions, well, João will have to leave, unfortunately, because he has a travel to start. But if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. There will be a Q&A session also later on. So it's all about interactivity as well. We want you to share your own experiences or to get new knowledge by asking questions. So now on to Elena, who will present a bit the urban programs that are being developed within the WELLBASED project. Elena, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Do you see my screen? Okay, full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
So good morning to everybody. Thanks, Miriam. My name is Elena Rocher, and I work at Las Naves, which is the Foundation for Social and Urban Innovation of Valencia City Council. And Las Naves is the current coordinator of a WELLBASED project, just to introduce you a little bit who we are. So in the next minutes, I will try to explain how we have introduced health in energy poverty actions and policies. And I will explain the theory that we have used behind it, okay? And also an example, a practical example of Valencia pilot. So we know there is already existing evidence that energy poverty affects human health. So then why a project such as WELLBASED? What is WELLBASED contribution to the current state of art? What is the innovative approach? So the answer is that our innovation or our contribution is the action and the approach that we have used to introduce health in the design of the actions, interventions against energy poverty. So how we have done this, how we have introduced health in urban policies? Well, we started with three main assumptions. First of all, the first one is the World Health Organization concept of health. It's a holistic concept that changes everything because it considers not only the physical health, but also the mental and social well-being and health. And also, if you see in the slide, the definition, it also suggests that we have to take care of our health from the perspective of prevention, on health prevention and health promotion, not just to wait till the disease is here to act against it, okay? And the second assumption is that all that surrounds us affects our health, our physical and mental and social health, okay? The way, the place where we live, the work we have, the environment has impact on our health, and this is what we call the health determinants. And for instance, these health determinants are at the origin of the health inequities. For instance, I'm sure that you have heard that the place where you live, the postal code determines the health you have. The most extreme example is that in the same city, you have find that the richest districts or neighborhoods have people there have longer life expectancies than in the poorest neighborhoods and areas of the city. So this is the extreme. And so energy poverty is related to many health determinants, as we will see afterwards. And so we need strategies for dealing with these social and environmental determinants of health that are related to energy poverty. And the second assumption is that energy poverty, as we have seen in Joao's presentation, is a complex problem. And this complexity needs solutions and answers from a multidimensional approach. That means that we have to define interventions not only from the perspective of energy efficiency, but we have also to look for interventions from the social policy domains, health policies, urban planning, gender equality, and so on. And then we have to introduce the health in all of these policies to tackle these energy poverty challenges. Okay, so how we have done this? Well, the basis of our project of WELLBASED intervention model is what we call the socio-ecological model of the health determinants by Dahlgren and Whitehead. It was defined many years ago and is still very useful. So this is represented by the rainbow in the slide, and this rainbow has not only inspired our logo, the logo of WELLBASED, but also all the analysis that we have done, and of course the action and the impact, how we are going to evaluate. So for those who don't know much about the socio-ecological model, just very quick hints on it. This maps the relationship of the factors of the environment at different levels that correspond to different layers of this rainbow, and then map the relation of these different factors with human health. Okay, so then you have the first layer, which is the individual lifestyle factor, which is the closest layer to the individual, to the less close layer, which could be the general socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental components, so like the macro environment. Okay, and also the living and working conditions and social and community networks. Okay, so what we have done in in WELLBASED is that each pilot has done an analysis identifying the health determinants at that are more relevant related to energy poverty in the areas of intervention, in their pilot areas, all right? So, and the second step has been to draw a pathway for energy poverty. The pathway for energy poverty tells a story. Tells the story of how people end up with energy poverty. And this pathway relates these health determinants with the causes and consequences of the energy poverty, and also with the interventions of the WELLBASED urban program, which is the key tool for the action at the pilot site levels. And also we have related all this with expected impacts on mental and physical health outcomes. Okay, you will see. So this is the pathway. As we said before, energy poverty is a very complex problem. So it needs like complexity. It is complex also to reflect it in a white paper. No? So we have tried to do this here, and then on the first to understand this pathway, in the left side of the slide, you can see all the drivers, the factors and health determinants that are related to energy poverty. Okay, and what we have done here is, if you see the legend, we have identified each of these factors to which layer of the socio-ecological model corresponds. For instance, the layer 1, which is about lifestyles. You have here the poor eating habits. It is the square with the orange line, and also these parameters of low control over test. The layer of social networks and community has to be with social isolation, is the yellow line square, and then we have the living and working conditions, such as the layer 3 in the green square of the low income, low educational background, or poor housing conditions, which is one of the most evident. And then the macro level, we have the layer 4 in blue square lines. Okay.
3 minutes left, Elena.
Okay, fine. And then at the right hand of the slide, you have the impacts of health. And this, the green squares are all the data and all the evidence that we are collecting on the health outcomes and on what is happening in the inside the household. So each pilot has adapted this pathway to this case. They have identified the relevant parameters, the relevant causes of the energy poverty in their pilot sites. And then they have defined the action to tackle each of these relevant health determinants or factors. And they have defined such a classic action plan, the different, for each action, traditional description, like title, description, output, resources, and so on. So this you have with each pilot, according to this analysis and pathway, have defined interventions in the WELLBASED urban program to tackle with these factors at each layer. They have defined interventions for layer 1, for layer 2, 3, and 4. For layer 1s that have to improve individual lifestyles, and here you have, for instance, has to be with socio-energy audits. In layer 2, these are interventions more oriented to strengthen communities and group support. On layer 3, that have to deal with living and working conditions, and also pilots have also defined some interventions for the macro level. Okay, you have here the pathway for Valencia, and these yellow colored squares are the factors that we have identified in Valencia that we want to address through the interventions of our urban program. You have here our urban program with the kind of interventions that we have defined for each layer. In concrete, our pilot focus more on the community support on the layer 2. So we expect that we will get more outcomes at the level of mental health. But other pilots, such as Dirne in Turkey or Leeds in UK, they focus more on layer 3 because they are doing like more physical interventions at the households, for instance. Okay. So to wrap up. Energy poverty is a complex problem that needs solution from a multidimensional approach and multi-stakeholder engagement, as Joao was saying. So we need not only energy efficiency, but intervention from other policy domains, such as housing, urban planning, healthcare and health promotion, gender equality, macroeconomic policies for energy prices, social policies. And also we we need an approach right to energy to tackle with inequities and for social injustice reasons. Okay. The second conclusion is that these urban programs, is what we call WOOPs, or these well-based urban programs, we think that they are replicable and they are available tool to introduce health in energy, but not only in energy, but we think that they can use it to introduce health in other kind of urban policies. Okay, but at the end, this is how we have managed to introduce the health in all the interventions to tackle not only the factors that cause energy poverty, but also to intervene in the health of people. And the last key message is that now currently we are WELLBASED is testing different interventions, and we will evaluate the effects of these different interventions, the socioeconomic audits, the retrofitting, the community groups, the support, and we will generate this evidence from both quantitative and qualitative data, as you will see in the following intervention, on how this kind of different interventions which impact they have on the physical and mental health of our participants. And so this is all. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I have not been more than 10 minutes.
No, thanks a lot, Elena. That was perfect. Thanks for explaining how, yeah, the well-based urban programs are designed. It's quite a, yeah, as I said, an innovative approach. And let's get a bit more concrete now. As I said at the beginning, we're really proud to have very initial first findings from the research we've done. It's kind of hot off the press. The figures are still hot, and Meryl is going to present these ones. So Meryl Stevens is from the Erasmus Medical School. And yeah, Meryl, you can share your screen and show us a bit what the households we've been in have told us in terms of figures of how their winter was.
Yes, so let me go back to... Yes, thank you, Miriam, for the introduction. So yeah, I can kind of build forward on what Elena finished with. So mainly based on the quantitative information that we collected so far. So I will give you some initial insights from the results that we collected over the past winter. So I will first tell a bit about the sample, so you know who and what we are actually talking about. So the data we collected so far come from 356 participants, and they come from 5 different countries: Spain, Latvia, Hungary, England, and Turkey. It's important to say that 150 of these 356 participants are from Turkey. So you will hear me often say that the results are kind of determined or influenced by the large majority of Turkish participants, but you will notice that throughout my story. So in terms of sex, almost 60% of the sample is female, and the mean age is 48.7 years. You also see in this graph that the mean age in Turkey is a bit lower than in the other pilot cities. So for example, in Latvia and in England, it's a bit higher. And the same actually goes for the sex, because we see that also in Turkey, the number of female is about 50%. Or the percentage of females, but in Latvia and Hungary, for example, it's a lot higher. So that's important to be aware of as well. Then for level of education, the 54% of the sample is considered to be low educated, of whom the majority completed primary education, as you can see in the table bar as well. These are the 3 levels that are considered as low education. And here is one example of where Turkey influences the results a lot, because 58% of their participants completed primary education. And For income, we use the income categories according to the European Social Survey. So they defined the different income categories for the different countries into 10 categories. And we see that 59% of our sample is in the lowest income category, so category 1. And in Turkey, this is a lot higher. It's even 99.4%. But for example, we see that in Spain and Latvia, actually a relatively higher percentage is in category 3. So that differs a little bit, but the majority is in the first category. So low income, we could say. We have different indicators around energy behaviors in our questionnaires, where most of the results come from. And I will discuss a few of them. So first of all, we included some of the energy poverty indicators, like we also saw in the first presentation. So one of the questions was whether the homes of the people were comfortably warm during the winter time. And we see a quite worrying result that 71% declared that their homes were actually not comfortably warm. Here we also see again that in Turkey, almost all of the participants declared that it was not comfortably warm, 98%. In Spain, it was also quite a majority, but for example, in Hungary and Latvia, we see it's a bit less. So it seems to differ across pilots a little bit. Another energy poverty indicator is whether people experience problems with their homes, such as a leaking roof, damp walls, floors, foundations, or rot in window frames or floors. So this is mostly like damp or humidity inside the homes. And here almost 64% declared that they experienced these problems. Same old story. So again, in Turkey, it's a lot more. So the housing conditions in Turkey seem to be the worst if we use this question to assess that. But for example, in Hungary, we see that a lot less people actually declare to have these kind of problems. Well, the sample size in Hungary is also still quite small, so we're not sure if this is going to stay the same throughout the study when they collect more or they include more participants. But that is what we see for now. Then arrears in the utility bills was also discussed in the first presentation. We asked this same question to our participants. 57% said that over the past 12 months, they were unable to pay their utility bills due to financial difficulties. And it's interesting to say that the majority of this 57% said that they were unable to do this twice or more even. Again, important to note that in Turkey, 97% experienced difficulties. But for example, in Latvia, it was only 10%. So that's, hence this high number of 57% for the overall sample. This is also a very nice part of our questionnaire, I would say, is where we ask our participants about different coping behaviors to find out how they cope with energy poverty and what are the kinds of behaviors that they prefer over others, or how do they go about the problems they experience in their daily lives. And we split them up into personal and rather public behaviors. I will start with the personal ones. We saw that almost 64% say that they often or always wear extra clothing to keep warm. And 20.5% said that they sometimes cope this way. And 48% said to often or always turn heating or cooling off to save money. It's important to note that this is not an option for all respondents, because in some apartments, it's not within your own power to turn your heating down, for example. And if we look at the rather public behaviors, so for example, going to a public building to keep warm or cool, we see that 87% says that they never or rarely do this. only 10% said to sometimes cope this way. And we see kind of the same results when we ask participants whether they go to a neighbor or friends or relative house to keep warm or cool. Almost 80% also said to never or rarely do this. So it seems that people choose the behaviors that are less visible, like more intimate, over the behaviors that are more visible to the outside world, like the more, let's say, public behaviors. Well, maybe because of shame or because of stigma, we don't know. That's not what we could find out so far, but it's interesting. It's an interesting observation, at least.
3 minutes left, Meryl.
Yeah, that's okay. We have very few results on health outcomes. We plan to collect a lot more. We're also measuring blood pressures and, well, doing a lot of stuff. But for now, we found that 65% of the samples says that they feel anxious or depressed, which we think is also quite a high number. Here you see how it's divided across the countries. For example, we see that in Spain and Latvia, it's a little bit less and a little bit more in Turkey, Hungary, and in the UK. We also included the depression, anxiety, and the stress skills in our questionnaire. The DAS instrument might be familiar to some of you. One of the questions there is whether people found it difficult to work up the initiative to do things. And surprisingly, 61% said that they, or sorry, this should be 66% said that they experienced this over the past 6 months. And last, we asked people about whether they have lung disease, and 30% of our respondents said that they were told by a doctor to have lung disease. Sorry, that's. But here we also see this is higher in Turkey and in the UK, for example, but lower in Latvia. We don't know if this is because of indoor air pollution, for example, that we could not find out yet, but it's quite a high percentage, I think, more than the average of the national population. So it's also an interesting observation. So last but not least, I'll show this very quickly. This is more to show what kind of data we are collecting besides the questionnaire. So we installed we install home sensors in the households of all the participants, or in their homes. And these devices measure CO2 temperature and humidity. And this is an example of the Valencia pilot. Here you see the average number of hours that the indoor temperature is below 18 degrees, and 18 degrees is the WHO recommendations for a healthy and comfortable indoor temperature. And you see that from mid-February onwards until mid-March, the average number of hours was between 16 and 20 hours per day that the indoor temperature was below the recommended level, actually. So for some days that was, you see here the maximum duration was 20.6 hours. So that's basically almost the entire day. It was probably quite cold as well in Valencia at that time, because you see, and from the beginning of March, it drops, because I think we all heard in the news about the very warm temperatures in Spain in the early spring. So that might be the cause. So yeah, this is what we are collecting also for all the households, and we are very curious to see what we find. Of course, we hope that our interventions will reduce this number and make sure the indoor temperature is above 18 degrees for a longer period of time, and the same goes for humidity and CO2 levels. We hope to improve them. I think I can skip this slide. That's okay. Yeah, so that's it. That's what we found so far, at least from the questionnaires that we collect. And I think Lucy and colleagues will tell a bit more about the interviews and more the qualitative experiences from people, which are also very important, because of course numbers don't always say everything, and the stories of people are also very explanatory and important. So Thank you for.
Thanks a lot, Marielle. Thanks for those first figures. I think it's still super interesting, yeah, to see. Well, first of all, to see the intensive research and the quite broad data collection that you and the colleagues have done within WELLBASED, and those very first coping strategies are interesting. I think the one that you're saying, where people would rather stay within their own personal and intimate area instead of showing themselves and showing the need they have towards like external people or going to public places, for example. That's an interesting insight, and I guess we will get even more as data collection goes on. Before we move on to the qualitative experiences and stories that colleagues have found in other countries, I wanted to share a question that was asked by Veronica on how in WELLBASED we isolated these findings, so the ones that you just presented, Marielle, findings on depression and anxiety as related to energy poverty issues. So I guess the question is on how, yeah, we can separate what comes directly from energy poverty and what might be related to other factors. I don't know who wants to answer this.
I can comment.
Yeah?
Well, at least from the research side a little bit. I think that's a really good question, because of course you want to know whether what you see comes from the condition that you study, or whether it's because of other circumstances. I think for now we haven't been able to do this really, because this is still very descriptive results, and we haven't been able to do any thorough analysis yet. But what we aim to do is that we collect a lot of information in the questionnaire, and we hope by doing so we can, if we find a relationship between well, energy behaviors or whatever and anxiety, depression, the fact that we collect a lot of other information about people's lives makes that we can eliminate other causes of anxiety and depression as far as possible. Of course, you can never eliminate everything, but you can, in your analysis, you can correct for a lot of different circumstances that can also cause anxiety or depression, and then yeah, make the association as clear as possible. But this is always a challenge for researchers, of course. But that's how, with like all the different data we collect, that's how we try to be able to assess this association.
Miriam, and also I think that with the qualitative research, we can like complete these findings. I mean, and so maybe it's from a qualitative social research, we can also explain these quantitative results.
Mm-hmm.
To complement it.
Okay, so I hope that these answers are okay for you, Veronica. Are there other questions to the previous speakers around? Sonia has a question. May I ask you, how did you recruit the participants of your sample? Did they participate in other activities within WELLBASED?
I can start to answer. Yeah, we have a control group and intervention group. Okay, so we will also compare the results among the two samples, and the control group does not participate in the activities of the interventions of WELLBASED. But of course, each pilot has defined some interventions for their participants, and so they will receive it. And the recruitment has done, each pilot has used like the most, what they have considered the most, the best options to recruit people. For instance, in the case of Valencia, the municipal energy office has done a very extended and very deep work on engaging NGOs, health centers, municipal social service centers. Also the municipal social services also like providing us with some part of the sample. So we have done a a lot of efforts to recruit the sample, but I mean, they had to comply with some inclusion criteria that are defined in the study research. And so this is how we, but it's I mean, it's like one of the most challenging parts of our project. Okay, so we are still struggling to get the numbers we committed to with the European Union, and all the pilots are doing all their best, they put in all the efforts to do it. Hopefully some of them will reach it, some others not. We'll see what happens, but it's like engaging stakeholders in the areas of intervention, key community leaders, NGOs, healthcare services, and so on. This is how we have recruited. Also, they have used media and some brochures and some other promotion material to support the recruitment campaigns.
Thanks very much, Elena. In the interest of time, we're going to move on now. There will be opportunities to ask questions after the next 3 presentations. And also, you're very welcome to leave a question in the chat, which somebody will deal with during the coming hour. So I'm really delighted to welcome 3 speakers in the next segment, which are 2 of the researchers that have been talking to people in the qualitative work, and also an expert from Spain on what's been going on in the winter. The qualitative work is important because it's about really understanding the depth of the challenges that people are facing in their everyday lives. And we will be visiting households. We have visited households this year. We'll also be going back next year to see how the effects of the interventions that we're performing play out in their lives. But the first bundle of data is really interesting because it allows us to tell you something about what's been going on in this winter, focusing on Spain and Latvia in particular. And I'm going to invite Victoria Pellicer-Cifres to talk about the Spanish case. Victoria works for Las Naves and has been doing interviews with Spanish participants.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation?
We can. It's not in presentation mode.
Not full screen now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you to all of you for participating here. What I'm going to present is our very preliminary first results of the qualitative work that we've done in the pilot of Valencia in Spain, which is obviously very aligned with the data that Meryl has presented. And well, a few numbers before starting. As Lucy has already said, the qualitative work it's ongoing. We have recently started it. We've done about 10 semi-structured interview, but we've also visited about 100 households with a very different profile in our pilot. We have people with very different background, people, well, with migrant origin, women, single mothers, elderly people, young people, students. What they mainly share between them is that they are low income or living in benefits. And generally speaking, what we are seeing in our qualitative work is obviously we are reinforcing what academic literature already says about the experience of living in energy poverty, which has already been said. But with this qualitative work, we are being able to contextualize it, let's say, to offer insights on particularities from our local context. So I'm going to split this 10 minutes in explaining the main challenges they face, the coping strategies that they said to us that they do to overcome the situation, and key remarks about the impacts on health, and some final remarks. So regarding the main challenges they face, the first of all, and it's very obvious, but well, we see they are living in poor housing conditions. And not only that, also that they have very low capacity for doing some improvements in these housing conditions. They have poor insulation, broken windows, dampness, drafts, low quality electrical connection as well, or even don't have heating or air conditioning. Part of our sample lives in a neighborhood close to the sea. So there's a big, also an important problem of humidity in this case. And well, this is one of the principal challenges they face, and it connects also what has already been said in the introductory presentation. The question about the bad building conditions. They also talk about their employment as a challenge they face. Because it's not always a problem that they are unemployed, but they have precarious employment or low quality employment. So this means that they are maybe multi-employed, but they are still low income. They don't have time to look for a better job, or at sometimes all what they earn is for paying the bill. So this is also true. Being attached in a virtuous circle, difficult to overcome. Another big challenge we found is that they have there's a lot of lack of information about all the existing aids. There are some aids, not at all. My colleague, the next presentation, will explain the national context, but they don't know about that. In general, people is unaware about the national aid, which is about discounts on the energy bill, and a part of that, there is the issue of the complexity of the bills. And also there is a completely lack of knowledge about the political commitments, and in our case, as a municipality from Valencia, about the local commitments on facing this. For example, we have this energy office, but it's not that not all people know it before being involved in WELLBASED projects. There is also the challenge about digital divide, in fact, and it's being increasing because energy companies are stopping sending their energy bills by paper. So people stop receiving their energy bill, but don't know where to access to their energy bills. A part of that, there is an excessive complex of process to manage the national aid. So not all, but maybe 96% of our cases have managed to access to this national aid, going to the energy office and being helped by well-based advisors, not doing by themselves online or by phone. And there's also the challenge about the tenancy regime, because we find there's a very low or poor collaboration on the part of the landlord, and people have fear on the part of the tenants, have fear to ask for renovations or to ask for improvements, because that may become a possible rent increase. This regarding the challenges, and regarding the coping strategies are again very similar to those that literature detail, and also Meryl had already explained some of them. People wearing extra clothes, rationing their consumption, turning off power slips, unplugging appliances, unscrewing light bulbs, or even if they are LED, but just with the fear of not having so many lights on. Children taking showers in the gym, all children taking showers at the same time. Well, people doing their own domestic and manual repairs to prevent heat from escaping, or colder from, to prevent heat from escaping. For example, they say, of course, cardboard to cover holes in the windows, plastic on windows, towels under the door in the bathroom to prevent heat to escape when they're having the shower, for example. Also using other waste of heat. If they cook with the oven or with the raclette, we try to sit all together very close and so feel warm. Using less space in the home, maybe living all in one room, sleeping all in one room. This also, we also found that very in different occasions. Of course.
Minutes, Victoria.
Yes, okay. Of course, carefully cutting back on other expenses, carefully household budgeting as well, or even deliberately incurring on debt if they have to pay this month because they have this extra cost, so they deliberately incur that, don't pay that month, or a small investment also in appliances. And how we are seeing in our qualitative research that this impact on health or not, and it also connects with the question done by Veronica. Well, we asked that if they did this association between the situation of energy poverty they were living, or the situation they were living in their houses, and their impact on health. We found it's more easy for them to make the relationship with physical health than with impact health. Mainly in winter, we did the interviews in winter, but in winters they easily related with those permanent colds and muscular pain. And we also asked about summer, and in summer is not that obvious, although they said that they had lots of difficulties to sleep at night and to have a good rest, but they didn't associate that with problems with impact with physical health. With mental health, it's a little more difficult to establish that relationship, although they talk about anxiety and stress and loss of meaning of social life, and also how they have reduced their social life. They are not that, in Valencia maybe it's some culture, we don't invite that much to our home, but we go out to spend time with friends, and this was the first cost they see reduced. But all of that was not that directly directed with the level of mental health, because maybe because it's more difficult also to talk about that. Maybe we will need to go in depth to analyze more that. And to some conclusions to finalize, we already said that there's a lot of lack of access to information and this sort of political commitment. So we as a municipality have a lot of work to do, to explain, to show what we are doing, and to reach people. We've seen that the impact on health is seen, but not as a multidimensional approach. My colleague Elena has explained how health needs to be understood with this systemic approach and multidimensional. And there we still have work to do there. And coming back to our theoretical framework that Elena has presented, we see that people's coping strategy is primarily focused on layer one, on individual lifestyles. And it also has to do with what Meryl has already presented, that there's more coping strategies related with social going out home are not that obvious. Here on our as we already say, in our WELLBASED program, we try to develop actions in different layers. So here, again, for example, in Valencia, we also try to develop actions in other lawyers, like mainly two lawyers, another pilots, they are more focused on third lawyer. Well, what do I want to say is that coping strategies for dealing with energy poverty in all lawyers of the terminal health are needed, and that, WELLBASED projects, we are trying to contribute to impact in different lawyers beyond what has been already done, but with our own limitation, because we are one European project, one concrete project. So other structural measures are still needed, like facilitate people to access to renewable energy solutions, for example, other structural measures like price protections, debt condemnations, a solid and integrated integrating the approach on the treatment of energy poverty with health system protocols, and of course the issue of energy efficiency in buildings that has already remarked on the first presentation. So until here, my presentation. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much, Victoria. That was great. And I can see so many similarities and learning that could happen between nations as well because of the work that I've done in the UK that we won't present today. So yeah, I'm going to move on very quickly because we're quite short of time to Marta Garcia Paris, who comes from Ecoservice and is an expert in dealing with energy poverty. So really, thank you very much for joining us, Marta. And we look forward to hearing your contextual information about what's going on in Spain.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks for the invitation. I hope you are seeing the presentation mode. Yeah?
You can see it perfectly.
Okay. Yeah, I want to congratulate all the WELLBASED team because I think the preliminary results are really interesting, and yeah, willing to know more about how the project goes in the coming months. I represent Ecoservice, which is a non-profit organization. We work mainly as practitioners, but also we have different roles in terms of identify energy challenges and propose solutions. We work on energy poverty since 2007, so we have faced many energy crises as practitioners, but also at policy level, providing advice. And the presentation today, my presentation today was meant to open a bit of focus and look at national level and coping strategies at this level 4 that Victoria was mentioned just before. No, I mean, but why? First of all, to make visible that these ill health-based coping strategies haven't reached the policy level yet. Hopefully, after WELLBASED, some of them could be incorporated at national level too, but also to mention that short measures are maybe more impactful in when an energy crisis comes. For example, in this winter, no? For example, and I'm going to explain later on these measures based on prices, but that we need to focus and to work in advance on medium and long-term coping strategies, just to prepare for the next winters and the coming ones in terms of energy. As I want to focus in Spain, I want to start with this overview, with this dashboard of indicators, just to notice that even though a lot is being done in Spain to tackle energy poverty at different levels. I mean, a lot of organizations, civil societies, academy, sector, public policies. There's a lot being done on energy, to tackle energy poverty, but the figures are exacerbating. We still, I mean, the inability, for example, the fourth indicator, inability to keep home adequately warm in winter, the perception is continuously increasing year by year. And the data we have is only until 2021, so we need to wait and see. I mean, this webinar is focused on last winter, so 2022, we still don't have data, but we expect these figures to rise. In Spain, we are lucky that we have a national strategy to tackle energy poverty. And this is a policy instrument that offers for the first time an official definition of energy poverty, which is a good measure, a starting point. You need to know what are you tackling in order to plan a strategy and to plan measures. It establishes indicators for its monitoring and targets for its reduction. I mean, the strategy fixes a minimum reduction of 25% by 25 and 50, so quite ambitious. And some measures are planned within the strategy, such as the social bonus, automatic, and for all sources, because in Spain we only have it for electricity, measures on household renovations, replacements on all appliances, and so on. So we have a good tool and a coping strategy. We have existing national coping strategies coming from long. For example, we have the social bonus from domestic consumers only from electricity since 2009. At national level, the percentages, the discounts have been increased after COVID or during COVID, and they are kept. But just to make a point of criticism here, for example, there are 1.2 million beneficiaries by the end of 2022. But the potential beneficiaries, I mean, the potential the people suffering a situation of vulnerability is quantified at 6.5 within the previous indicator. So something is yeah, we are not doing, I mean, the measure should be changed to make it accessible to all. Also, we have banned from disconnection since COVID, since 2020, and I mean, it still exists in Spain until the end of this year, 2023. And of course, we apply at national level corrective measures as the payment of energy bills. Just in 2023, the national government presented a plan, the Energy Security Plus plan, reinforcing some of the previous measures, some of them coming from COVID, but reinforcing them due to this winter energy crisis. So it maintains the ban on quoting of basic electricity, water, and gas suppliers to vulnerable consumers. There has been a temporary suspension of the 7% tax on electricity generation, and also a reduction in the VAT rate on energy until the end of this 2023 on electricity and gas. And the maximum selling price of butane is still limited during this year, which is a good coping strategy. And if you see, I mean, well, and a fourth one, it's not from the plan, but it's a national measure to the Iberian exception cap electricity prices that affect Portugal and Spain and limits or fixes there is a maximum, yeah, to limit the electricity price in Spain. These measures are or short. I mean, they have been deciding through this year and taking into account this last winter, and they have been really effective, but they have only based on price, one of the causes of energy poverty. So this is a good strategy, focus on price on the short term, but as mentioned before, we need to look on medium and long term strategies focusing on the other causes of energy poverty. And I want to also mention not only measures at national level, but as we all know here, because we are working with energy poverty, we know that, I mean, energy poverty happens at household level. This is atomized, this is diffuse, and this is very, very local. So it is really, really important to support local level with coping strategies too. I mean, here with the example of the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, the European Commission service that provides support to municipalities to tackle, in this case, energy poverty. And I put the example of the results of the first calls, where 7 municipalities in Spain are receiving technical support to tackle energy poverty. Mainly, the great part of this technical assistance are based on the diagnosis, but for us it is really interesting first to measure. So it is important to have measured, to have a diagnosis, then to plan with the strategies or whatever, and then to act, right? And yeah, and other initiatives at the end when you want to focus or to tackle energy poverty and to have strategies related to price. You need to think, for example, how to incorporate vulnerable consumers on the energy transition, how to make them participate from renewable energy so they don't have the prices so depending on fossil fuels, for example, or the market. So yeah, a lot of projects are going on also in this area of trying to make vulnerables participate from the energy transition. And I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marta. Very, very well within time. We much appreciate it because we're running late as we could have predicted. So really great to get that insight from the broader Spanish context. So thank you very much for your inputs there. I'll hand over now to Dina Vite, who's been doing some work in Latvia with WELLBASED, doing the qualitative interviews with Latvian participants in the project, and look forward to hearing this.
Hello, dear colleagues. I hope you can hear me. So I am Dina Vite. I live in Jelgava. I work at Latvia University of Life Sciences and Technologies. And also I am a researcher in this project. So I'm really happy to be here and to hear all these presentations, especially Meryl's presentation about quantitative data, because I was wondering why these results I got from my interviews, they were not interesting to me. And somehow I realized that where are these problems? People were not desperate about situation and what's going on. And I got this, I got what was happened because this is a question of sampling. We had here in Jelgava quite how to say, relatively people with relatively high income and people with pretty good situation. So, and this is also my case when I carried out these 18 interviews. And 4 more I have to do. So as you can see also here, women are more active. I got interviews from 15 women and 3 men, and they were aged from 23 until 82. And I tried to look for different structures of families, like single parent families or retired couples or single people or families with children. So I tried to make this sampling as diverse as I could. How were these interviews for me? Informants were really open for my questions. They were really willing to answer them, but somehow these answers were very quick. It seemed that these questions and these answers are like self-explanatory for them, and there is nothing interesting, nothing to talk about so much. And what else was interesting, questions about this typical day of family members, they were really sensitive. People asked me, so why do you want to know this? Why is it relevant in this situation, in this project? Yeah. So here you can see some houses I visited. They are not renovated. They are not new. Like both private houses and both these block houses. Also, one type of wooden house you can see here. So this is nothing very special here in Jelgava. So what are main challenges? What are main challenges if I have to answer this question? So first, of course, people reported about high expenses, about gas, about heating and electricity. Some of them even showed me these numbers because they calculate these numbers very carefully. So last winter, for example, they paid about gas about 80 euros. This January, for example, they paid about 300 euros, and this is quite much for them. Then next challenge for them was lack of money for significant investments in the house or in their apartment. And what was typical for them, they have planned all these steps. What do they have? What they need to do about their houses? They precisely know their situation with this house or with this apartment, and they know what could be the next steps, what should be improved. And they are really aware of this, but they don't have money at this moment just to do all these steps they need. And this is this question of like this average level of income in Latvia, actually. Also, some people reported about limited access to the city infrastructure, but actually this wasn't about complaining about municipality or about government, but it was just some precise, some very concrete things that could be done in a better way. Also, people they can't improve anything with their houses if there is a common infrastructure with neighbors, and if these neighbors are passive and they can't cooperate somehow, and so there are some limitations, but main of them is money issue. Next point about challenges is inability to come to an agreement for insulation of the house, especially for these block houses where in these houses, if there is majority of these inhabitants are old people, they don't agree to renovate this house, and these people who are active, who would like to do this, they can't do anything because this is about agreement between them. For example, these old people don't want to borrow money from the bank and so on. And next, which is quite typical for Latvia case, this is about our housing. This is insufficient space for every family member. This is what people report about, that sometimes family with 2 children, they have just 2 rooms in their apartment, and this is very regular, very normal situation in Latvia. How they try to cope with these challenges, with these problems? First of all, they reported about very, very careful planning of resources needed. It means in terms of money, in terms of firewood, for example, in terms of choosing of even payments through a year. So, and this is, it really was a story about very precise calculation of these resources. For example, people could predict that these expenses about firewood would raise, and they bought this firewood in last spring already. So it was about very, very careful calculation of it. Next is about accounting of bills, and they really write down all these expenses and they calculate their budget. This is what they do normally, and for them it gives this opportunity to compare and plan their budget. Next, what was interesting, I found out this idea of community support. A head of one block house reported me that he tries to remind their inhabitants, their neighbors, about some payments they are maybe late or something else. So people try to support each other. Neighbors also try to support each other, but here we need these active people, active leading people in this small block house maybe, or in this small community somehow. Yeah, and also they share some types about energy saving. What I could mention, if we speak about changing of energy suppliers maybe, or something like that, people are rather conservative than cautious, and they are not willing to change these suppliers so quickly. They are quite traditional, and they compare all these suppliers, yes, and they follow to these expenses and these prices, but their choices are not very quick. They are not very prompt. What was interesting else? People tend to live together. Especially retired people reported that what could we do if our son or daughter with their children, if they didn't live with us. So this is about cooperating, just to pay about all this stuff.
Dina, just 2 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, and what else? Living in convenient temperature. It was also reported by my respondents, and just they reported about mild savings of heating and electricity. Instead, they did savings on entertainment, different events. And one more coping strategy is about diversification of heating sources, but it wasn't so significant for my informants. And instead of conclusions, I don't know, maybe this is just preliminary assumption or something like that, but I would say that these informants that take part in this study, they are quite independent and self-regulating social agents. Like I told you already, they don't complain about municipality so much or about government so much. They don't plan to migrate anywhere, but they have planned their lives, they know their situation, they are aware of their situation, and they act according to this. They are quite rational, I would say. And yeah, and also in the end, I can say that there maybe we can find some slight changes in the habits of informants. For example, here you can see this device about measuring this air quality, and one informant said that I try to make this face happy again and I open the window. So this is about changing habits. And my last quotation comes from a really optimistic old lady, and she said to me, "Are you saying my data will be stored in Valencia? You know what? You say them that I want to go and see Valencia. Aren't they able to organize a trip for us?" So I will end with this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dina. Yes, Valencia is a very beautiful place. I'm not surprised they want to go. So we do have one question in the chat from Nikki Willand. I'm going to ask Victoria and Dina to answer that in the chat. And we're going to move straight on in the interest of time. So we're very pleased to have with us Veronika Jivakova from the Energy DG of the European Commission. Veronika is the Energy Efficiency Policy Officer, and she's going to be reflecting on what she's heard today. She has 10 minutes or so to do that, and then we will then hit the end of the event. But if anybody wants to stay a little longer to ask questions, you're very welcome to. Thank you very much, Veronika. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, and it was really interesting for me to hear from you on the ground, because of course we are the policymakers and we don't have the experience from the ground. So maybe just to tell you a little bit in the context what I do. I work in the Energy Efficiency Unit, and we are the unit which is responsible for the Energy Efficiency Directive. There is another separate unit which deals with the Energy Efficiency of Buildings Directive. So I know there's been a lot said today about renovations and buildings, but this is not the primary focus of my unit. What we do is really focusing on energy efficiency in general. And you might know that the Energy Efficiency Directive was first introduced in 2012. There was an amendment in 2018. And in 2021, as part of the Fit for 55 package, there was a recast of this directive, which has been negotiated for the past 2 years. And there was an agreement in March, and hopefully the text will be published by the end of the summer. And I think the ED recast is really the reply to the structure, to the need for the long-term measures. It was already mentioned today that there have been many emergency measures put in place following the increase of prices, of energy prices, but what is needed, and we recognize it, is really long-term measures. So the Energy Efficiency Directive does many important things in this regard. The first thing is that we introduce the first ever EU definition of energy poverty. And I think this is very important. We always insist on definitions, and there was some opposition from member states who argued that there is no need to have a distinct definition of energy poverty, saying that it's part of general poverty. But we disagreed, because it is understood from, based on research and experts saying that really energy poverty is a distinct form of poverty, and it stems from the combination of several factors which have been already mentioned today many times. So I think very important what the EED recast does is that we will have a first ever EU definition of energy poverty. Maybe the link with health. We recognize in sectoral legislation in energy that there is a link between energy poverty and health. This has already been recognized in the Electricity Directive. Following that, the Commission in 2020 published the Energy Poverty Recommendation, which is now being updated. So this year, the Commission is working on an update of the Energy Poverty Recommendation. But health has always been recognized as part of the sectoral legislation in energy. And it's also the case in the Energy Efficiency Directive, where we introduce what is called the Energy Efficiency First principle. And basically, where health is important in this principle is that we are setting a new requirement for member states to, when it comes to major investment decisions or major policy and planning decisions, to evaluate based on cost-benefit assessments whether there is the need to build new infrastructure, for example, or whether we can put in place energy efficiency measures. And what we are asking here is for member states to develop cost-benefit methodologies, but take into account wider benefits of energy efficiency and from a societal perspective. And there we mention explicitly health, because we know that energy efficiency has been identified as one of the most efficient solutions to tackle energy poverty, and also, health is one of the multiple or wider benefits of energy efficiency. So I think there, because member states will have to publish and design these cost-benefit methodologies. Any research or any input on how to monetize or how to quantify the health benefits stemming from energy efficiency, this will be very useful. Some of the other novelties that we bring in the Energy Efficiency Directive is member states will have to set up networks of experts, also including health experts, to advise member states on how to put in place strategies to benefit energy poor people or vulnerable households. So there again, I think it might be useful for you to know that there will be this obligation for member states to either set up networks of experts or entrust already existing networks of experts. And these networks of experts will be tasked with, helping the member states provide national definitions of energy poverty, choose the right criteria, and in general provide the knowledge for new policies. So there, I'm sure research from your projects will be very beneficial. And last but not least, what we have in the Energy Efficiency Directive recast is really focus on implementing energy efficiency measures as a priority among energy poor people and vulnerable households. And there is the annual energy savings obligation for member states to reduce energy in end use. And now there is a specific sub-target where a share of these savings will have to be achieved among people affected by energy poverty. And every member state will have to establish the share of people who are considered as living in energy poverty. Basically, this is already an existing obligation that member states were asked to report in their national energy climate plans. Many member states have not done so. And so what we introduce in the recast is 4 indicators, which member states will have to use as a fallback option in case they have not identified the share of people living in energy poverty. And these indicators have already been mentioned here today. So it's the inability to keep a home adequately warm, it's arrears on utility bills, it's the share of population living in a dwelling with damp walls and foundations, etc., and the population at risk of energy poverty. So these 4 indicators are explicitly mentioned in the directive, and member states, if they have not already notified in their NECPs the share of people living in energy poverty, then they'll have to use these indicators. And based on this share of people, then they will have to achieve the share of savings among people affected by energy poverty. So I think this replies to the need for really long-term and structural measures, because there will now be this obligation. Member states are asked to also implement forward-looking investments and to mitigate the distributional impacts from other policies which come with the energy transition. So, of course, this directive will only be published by the end of the summer, and then there is 2 years transposition period. So it will take some time before these measures will have impact. But I think that it's already good that we strengthen many of the provisions. It was already mentioned today, for example, the lack of information or the lack of access to financing, or even the split incentives between owners and tenants. So all of these requirements are also strengthened in the Energy Efficiency Directive. There's a requirement, for example, for member states to set up one-stop shops. So in each member states, there will have to be a one-stop shop where people can come. A special focus also on the vulnerable groups of the population. And really the idea is to disseminate the information on available financing, also on the energy providers, building expert, etc. So I think it's a good basis. And what we're doing now, just the last thing to mention before I end, what we are doing now is preparing guidance notes for member states on how to actually implement this directive, because of course we have the legal text itself, but we are now working on really facilitating the implementation for member states. So hopefully together with the directive when it's published, we will also publish guidance notes on the implementation of the new provisions, so including those on savings among people affected by energy poverty. So in any case, if you have any questions or suggestions, we're always happy to hear from people working on the ground. So you can always get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Really great to hear that story of what's going on at EU level. And there was one element of that. Oh, so just to say, I realise we've run out of time, but we'll maybe go on for another 5 minutes or so, just to allow any questions to be mopped up and responses there. One element of what you said, which we are doing in WELLBASED, which is around quantifying the benefits of interventions. And I'll just let Elena say something on that, because she knows more about it than me.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Yes, I was also thinking of that when I was listening to Veronica. Thanks, Veronica, for all this new information that you have shared with us. In fact, we have to deliver some policy recommendations at the end of the project, and Las Naves is the responsible to do it. So this will be very useful to see what in the next 18 months is happening with all this new context for energy efficiency and energy poverty. So yeah, okay, you have seen today that we are doing a quantitative evaluation. You have seen that we are doing this qualitative also data collection and evaluation. They are complementary, but we are also doing a third evaluation, which is a cost effectiveness assessment of the interventions we are implementing on energy poverty related to health, also related to the impact on health. Okay, so we will implement some methodologies and so on to carry out this cost effectiveness assessment. Next.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. Are there any other questions for any of the speakers we've heard from today? Is there anybody that would like to comment or question? It looks like everybody has run out of energy for the end of the hour. But I just wanted to say thank you very much. I think there's been some really special contributions today. To hear those emerging findings is really great. As I'm an academic, and as academics, we don't normally talk about our findings until we've done very, very thorough reviews of them. And that's not to undermine what we've talked about today, but we've kind of pushed ourselves to get some findings out quickly because of the huge topical relevance of this issue. And we hope to continue to communicate on our work throughout the coming year with that in mind, given that we face another winter ahead, which is likely to be expensive for our participants in terms of the costs, but also the summer and the heat in the summer that particularly our Turkish and Spanish colleagues are facing is going to be really important. Nihal, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. If people want to leave, then of course go ahead. Because we talk a lot about the evaluation of the interventions, which we will ultimately do towards the end of the project. But of course, it takes time to collect sufficient data to really evaluate what the effects are of all the different interventions. But in the meantime, we will also look at the data that we collect, like more like demographically about the situation the people are in, like I presented today mainly. So I was wondering, maybe Veronica, I'm curious if there is like any need from your side or like any questions more about the situation that the people are in, or like their health status or their energy poverty status that is interesting for you to know about the sample that we have in our study, like as opposed to what the effect of the different interventions is. I'm not sure if the question is clear. Because we will also deliver our first analysis report, I think in October, where we won't have a lot to say about the effect of the interventions yet. It's more like kind of descriptive about our population, their health status, their energy poverty status, etc.
Effectively, it's about the data, the sort of data we presented today, and the sort of story we presented today, which is more of an observation of what's going on in our sample, rather than an analysis of what's happened at the end of an intervention. Yeah,
exactly. And that will be extended, of course, because towards October, we will have a lot more participants, so also a lot more data collected.
I'm not sure if I understand completely, but we're always interested in knowing. As I said, many member states are opposed to this whole idea of energy poverty. So the more, let's say, evidence we can have that it is a distinct form of poverty, so it's valuable. But of course, if you can have also the impacts of the interventions, that's valuable as well. But anything, yeah, even the observations, what leads to energy poverty, it's very useful. We introduced those 4 indicators to measure the share of population living in energy poverty, but there are many other indicators which could be used. Some of these indicators have been argued against, like the inability to keep the home adequately warm. Some people say it's quite subjective. So yeah, anything that can increase the pool of knowledge. And as I said, this is the first time that we introduce the definition of energy poverty. And we are preparing the updated definition on energy poverty. So yeah, the more we can demonstrate, the better.
Thanks, Veronica. Just to say that we will be writing a written version of this, a short kind of brief, a sort of briefing about the initial results, effectively. So we will share that with you when we're done.
Okay, great.
Elena, I see your hand is up as well. This is the last question, I think.
No, yeah, Lucy. Just you were quicker than me in announcing the fact sheet, the fact sheet that we will deliver with all these findings from all this first winter, fully in 1 month or something like that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Elena. And thanks everybody for coming. It's been really great to be able to talk about our work. And in a way, having this event has forced us to talk about our work, which is great. And we hope you will look out for our briefing, which, as Elena says, will be coming out in about a month. And thank you so much to all our brilliant speakers. Really great to have that range of views from across different perspectives. Much appreciated that you put the effort in to help us pull the event together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll
Bye.
share recording and presentations with all of you once it's ready.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.